You've manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me happy.
Hello, and welcome to Broadcast Television's only Star Trek talk show, A Captain's Log. I'm your co-host, Lily Fox-Lim, and I would introduce you to our host, BK, but he seems to be missing. BK!
Hey, how's it going?
You're late! The show has already started!
Oh, yes, absolutely. Beam me up, Scotty, right?
No, why did you say that?
But hi, Lily. First off, I'm late, but I had a meeting with our producer, Dustin Serrano, on Earth, and we were kind of going over the show like we normally do, and he told me a really funny story about the guests that we're having. We're talking about it in the pre-interview.
Okay. Can you tell me what it is? Or is
Well,
it a
yeah, in due
secret?
time, my friend. You'll find out in about 10 minutes. But today we have to talk about our guest, Julie Caitlin Brown.
There's so much going on today. Today's an exciting day.
It certainly will be. Now, today our guest is Julie Caitlin Brown, who played Ty Kajada in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and she was also in the Next Generation series where she played Vekor.
Ooh, she's also been on Babylon 5, Jag, Law and Order, and so many other popular TV shows. From what I was told, she got into acting through theater, which is awesome. I can't wait to hear more about that.
Yes, there's so much more, Lily.
I'm starting to feel left out about your stories and your meetings. Next time, I want to take the tractor beam and meet with producer Dustin myself.
Yeah, you know what? I'm sure he'd love to do that and meet with you and go over the shows, but that's a conversation to be had later.
After this break, we will have Julie Caitlin Brown. Stay tuned.
A Captain's Log returns in a moment.
Welcome back! Hope you missed us as much as we missed you guys. This is a Captain's Log.
Allow us in welcoming on our show our guest for today, Julie Caitlin Brown.
You know, she has had an interesting life, and I can't wait for her to come on and tell us.
I've been waiting all night for this, and you've been a little mysterious today.
Really?
BK.
I was late.
Yeah,
yeah.
Well, and all the. Hi, Julie. Welcome to A Captain's Log. Let's get started.
It's nice to be included. Thank you for thinking of me.
Now, Julie, we've learned some fun facts about you through our research, but one of them is the fact that you have two names, two first names. Do you mind sharing that lore behind it, please?
So, a little bit of trivia. We're going to start with a little trivia in case I ever write a memoir. I was born with the first name of Julie. And when I went to go into acting, there were other Julie Browns. The one from MTV and the one that Earth Girls Are Easy. So I chose the name Caitlin because it's the Welsh version of Catherine, and I adored Katharine Hepburn. And so my sister's name was Kathleen, so I couldn't do Catherine because that would be weird. So I went with Caitlin. And when I did these episodes and I did Broadway and I did Babylon 5, I was Caitlin. And then, I don't know, something just shifted in me and I said, you know, I miss my real name. And there's a whole bunch of actresses doing that right now. I don't know if you are aware, but there's a whole bunch of people that went, my name's not Emma, it's Emily. It's like, okay. But it's because there's a rule in Screen Actors Guild, you can't have the same exact name as another actor. Same thing with equity. You cannot have the same name as someone who already has that name. So that's why you see a lot of people throw an initial in there, Michael J. Fox, things like that. I took back Julie and I became Julie Caitlin Brown. And the nickname is JCB. And about in 1997, after doing conventions for a few years, I started my own agency called Illumina Productions, and we represent about 70-something actors in the convention space. A lot of my fellow Star Trek and Babylon 5 talent, but also just wonderful, wonderful voiceover talent and, you know, Star Wars and you name it, we do it. It's a lot of fun. I get to travel all over the world and meet people. It's a blast.
Tell us a little bit more about Illumina production. Did you carefully craft it to be more representative of the sci-fi type of actors?
When I went to the cons, it was, here's a bag of money. Thanks for playing. And I went, whoa, this is a big business. Because I'd come from the music industry. I had been an agent for rock bands and comics when I was 21. When I was pregnant with my first child, and I was in the music business. I had my own cabaret show. I was doing musicals in San Francisco and Berkeley. And a buddy of mine said, "Oh, you really want to learn something? Come work for me. I'll show you the dirty side of this business. I'll show you how to be an agent." I went, "Oh, that sounds like fun." So I started working for the agency, unique name, in Napa, California. And I booked Dana Carvey, Paula Poundstone, the Bobcat, Bobby Goldthwait, lots and lots of great people. And I booked a bunch of rock and roll bands. So when I started doing conventions, I said, well, this is kind of like theater marries comedy, marries rock and roll because everyone's crazy. Oh, I can do this. And so I just took the Screen Actors Guild boilerplate contract and I married it to my live events. And I began repping my fellow actors. And 30 years later, I'm still doing it.
Wow, that is such a cool story. I love how you connected those two ideas and gave it a fresh perspective. So now you're working with some really big names, really amazing people too. I've seen some of the roster. Do you have any stories that you'd like to share with us?
I paid Dana Carvey $500 to do a gig in Vallejo, California. I kid you not, it was called Talk of the Town. And I actually ran into Dana, and another funny story, I ran into, they were doing Wayne's World. So I ran into him and when they had Aerosmith on the set, because we were shooting the Gambits part 1 and 2, and I played Vekor, and I ended up meeting them. And they all came to the set for a set visit. It was hilarious. I have pictures with Steven Tyler. Well, I came back from lunch and I wanted to get into the makeup chair, and there was a little boy in the chair, and I said, I'm sorry, honey, but I need to get my makeup, done. And I literally had a red mohawk and big ears, and I was in, 4-inch boots, and I was a badass, mercenary alien named Vekor. And he said, well, my dad wants to meet you. I said, well, who's your dad? He said, plays guitar for Aerosmith. I said, oh, I'm coming. And where am I? Oh, let's go. And so I ran down with him to the set, and here I am striding in my, fake leather and my mohair and my boots. And these chicks are looking, because it's the big rock and roll scene where they're going, we're not worthy. And so it's a concert with Aerosmith. And as I walk in, they go, what are you doing here? I said, well, this little boy. And they go, oh, his father. Oh, yeah. So I end up meeting them. And as I'm walking out, someone goes, I'm sorry, could Steven Tyler have a photo with you? And I went, yes. And I turned around, there's Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. But here's the kicker. They were sitting there with a buddy of mine that I knew when I was booking rock and roll, named Peter Afterman, when I was 21 years old. Peter was putting the music licensing together for all these bands and stuff. And I'm like, Peter, what are you doing here? He goes, who are you? I said, it's me, Julie Brown. He went, so I said, you guys want to come to the set? And they go, yeah, we have a set visit. So we all marched down together. I led the entourage. And when we got there, Patrick goes, who are these people? Why are they here? What's going on? I said, it's Aerosmith, be nice. And then we couldn't find Joe and we couldn't find Steven after all. Everyone was taking pictures and was talking. It's totally screwing up the schedule, let me tell you. And we can't find them. We turn around and they're on the transporter beam going, beam me up, Scotty. They were just geeking out. They're total Trekkies.
What? Aerosmith or Trekkies?
Why didn't you tell me that earlier? That's so cool.
It was that 10-minute thing, I wanted to keep it a secret because I thought you'd enjoy the story instead of me just like babbling it out.
Julie, you grew up in San Francisco and got into music early on. So you started out singing and playing guitar, competing in vocal contests, performing jazz, and leading several bands. Can you share more about your early music career?
I grew up in the North Bay, and I began singing in front of people when I was 10 years old. I started soloing at church. I liked the captive audience. I started writing music at 13. I auditioned for the jazz choir at my high school, but they usually only let you in once you were a junior, and I was a freshman. And I was a young freshman because I had skipped a grade from the 4th to the 5th grade. And so there I was at like 12 and a half years old. And I got into the choir, but I have scoliosis. So right after I got into high school, they put me in a brace up to my neck and down past my bottom for 3.5 years. And so it was kind of tough. I could take it off when I was singing. I could take it off when I played sports, but I was pretty much in it 23 hours a day. And it's because my backbone was curved. But it taught me a lot about humility and not to rely on the physical. This is just, it's why I like to play characters. I'm not relying on this, I'm relying on this. and the human condition, or in my case, the many alien conditions that I got to play.
Wow, I get it myself now. Back in high school, I played lacrosse, but then I got hurt. It didn't just, mess me up physically. It got to me mentally too. That sounded really dark. I needed a distraction from sports, so I tried acting just to stay busy, and turns out I loved it.
Yes.
So with your scoliosis and braces, did you ever get back into singing, or how did you get into acting?
I went through the North Bay Company with a man named Alex Urban. He really encouraged me to continue theater. So I did. I worked in Berkeley. I worked in San Francisco. I had my own one-woman cabaret show there. I took it to LA, couldn't get arrested in LA. Yeah, I was doing commercials in San Francisco and stage, and they were like, you're too tall, because I didn't go to any prestigious school. I dropped out of Sacramento State as a sophomore, and I started studying privately. I had, Seth Riggs, Michael Jackson, and Natalie Cole's vocal coach was my vocal coach in LA. I had fantastic acting coaches. I had Alan Rich, who studied with the group theater when he was a young man. Stella Adler, he was my coach. I studied French. I studied business. I learned a lot about why the business does what it does. But as I was moving through all of this, I did get married. I did have a child at 22. And that marriage ended. And I said, well, I want to be independent. I need to earn my own living. And I had done a bunch of 9X commercials back in the day. And the producer from Young and Rubicam, Texas East, said, come out to New York, take a break, see if you want to stay married or not married. And, basically it was like, you were a kid when you got married, just take a minute. So I went out to New York, and I met Holly Lebed, who changed my life, and also Ken Slevin from Cunningham, Escott, DePini, and Slevin. And I immediately started working on commercials, but New York was too much. So I went to Florida, and I was booking 1 out of 3 auditions. I worked with Burt Reynolds. I worked with Adam Baldwin. I worked with John Travolta. I was doing movies. I was doing television. I was doing print. I was doing commercials. But I had to leave my son with his dad, because the life of an actor, it's quite vagabond, and it wasn't the right situation for him. So what was supposed to be 3 months turned into 3 years. And in 1990, I did A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum with George Wendt from Cheers. Ted Danson was in the audience on opening night. It was hilarious, because I later went and did a role on Vekor with Ted. When I did that, it made me equity. I got home from that summer stock. My son was with me. We had a wonderful time. We met Chris Reeves. My son learned to play pool on his table. We were all doing cabaret and stuff. It was just a magical, magical time. And when I got home, my agent said, I have an audition for you and you're not going to love it. I was, why? Because it's back in New York. I said, what's it for? She said, the national tour of Grand Hotel. I said, what's the part? She said, a 6-foot-tall Italian lesbian. I said, well, that's me. I can do that. And so I went up and I auditioned, and Tommy Tune said, okay, cool. And I thought, yes, okay. Next level, I'm going to be on the national tour, and I'll do it for 6 months, and then maybe I can be ready for Broadway. And I got a phone call from my agent, and she's like, they don't want you for the tour. They want you for Broadway. You move in 2 weeks. So on one audition, I got Williamstown Theater Festival. Second audition, I got the lead in a Tony Award-winning musical called Grand Hotel. And I played Rafaela Otaño for 2 years. I got to work opposite Cyd Charisse, who made her Broadway debut at 71, on point no less. Amazing woman. I worked opposite John Schneider, so that was cool. And then I came out, and I came out because I missed my son, and I said, I got to go home. And I started working in television. I got a pilot on my 4th audition in LA. It didn't go, but then I got called at home by Mary Jo Slater. No, wait, that's not true. I got Deep Space Nine, Ty Kajada on Deep Space Nine. Then I got Vekor on The Next Generation. And then Mary Jo Slater called me at home, and I got offered Babylon 5 to play Natoth. So, yeah, that's kind of how I got doing what I was doing.
Wow, that's such an amazing story. You moved around so much early on in your career, and you managed to do it all while raising a young child. Very impressive. Now, I really appreciate you opening up about your scoliosis. A lot of people might have skipped over that, but it made your story even more inspiring. It was great to see how it encouraged Lili to share a little bit about her own life too, right?
Yeah.
Now, here you both are working as artists in this incredible industry. Thank you for sharing your journey.
Absolutely. And, I think that's really why we share those types of things. Because as artists, people wonder all the time, why was art so important to you? Well, because when you're a little kid and you're out in the country and you've got 4 sisters and an older brother and you're an oddball. I was, 5'9" at 15 years old. I was 6 feet at 16 years old. And I didn't really dance because of the back brace, and I sang contralto. I sang tenor. I was National School Choral Award. I was All-State Jazz Choir soloist. But I want to say to people, how do you get over there? Well, you have to see yourself over there. And then when there's an opportunity, you have to have the courage to take the opportunity. And sometimes there's a payoff, and sometimes there's a trade-off. My son, who's 41 now, and I have another son. I had another child at 42, who's going to be 22 next week. There, as artists, especially as women, we sometimes have to make some very painful choices if we want to also be a mother. If you don't have a supportive spouse, if you have a difficult marriage, there's illness in your life, whatever, sometimes you have to postpone your dreams. You have to maybe go for that dream, but you give up something else. So it's always challenging, but it informs us as artists, because people out there in the real world, they have a lot going on too. They need to hear that we suffer and that we triumphed and that we used our art in a positive way, not only to uplift and inspire the people that watch our art, but to help us remember who we are, which is non-physical energy in a physical form, having a human experience.
So you worked with Cyd Charisse on the award-winning Broadway play Grand Hotel. Is there anything from that play that you can share with us?
Well, you want to know what the greatest compliment I ever got in my career?
Please share.
Cyd came into the show, and she was replacing Renee Ceballos, who replaced Lilian Montevecchi, who originated the role and had gone out on tour. And when Cyd came in, everyone was very nervous around her because she was 71. She was a brilliant movie star, and people were just treating her, with kid gloves. And I'm supposed to be in love with her. I'm supposed to have been her confidant for 22 years. I'm supposed to be secretly in love with her. I'm sort of manipulating her. She's in love with the Baron. The storyline is that he is killed defending this character's honor, blah, blah, blah. And they wouldn't let me talk to her. So there was a scene, there was a moment where she was supposed to take my hands and look at me and say, "But what do you want?" And it's the first time in the 22 years she's ever asked me. So I wanted a moment to struggle with, do I tell her? And I don't. And with Renee and with Lilian, I took my hands away, right? Because I was afraid. Well, she dropped my hands. And I said, "Miss Charisse, if I could just share with you that this is the first time you've ever asked me how I feel about anything. And you really want to know. And it's really terrifying for me. So if you could just let me pull away from you because I'm afraid, I'd love to try it that way if you would try it with me." Oh my God, you would have thought that I tried to kill her. Show January 27th, my 31st birthday. I was there for almost 2 years. And I got a call from my agent, and she said, they're doing Grand Hotel in Texas, and Cyd is starring, and she's asked you to come be Rafaela.
What? Really? I mean, of course you said yes, right?
I had to say no.
What? You said no?
I was doing the two-parter of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Oh, she was doing the Gambit 1 and 2 episode.
Yep, makes sense.
Moreover, which was about 4 weeks of work because it was 2 8-day shoots over, it was long. And I didn't want to leave my son. So I said, I am so honored. I ended up seeing her at Dan Tana's in LA. And I went up to her and I said, it was such an honor to be asked to work with you again. And I just want you to know how special our time was on Broadway. And she said, oh, I would have loved to have worked with you. You were the best, Rafaela. So it was very nice.
Now, that is one of the best compliments that you can receive. Wow. Now let's flip the script just a little bit. I'd like to talk about one of your first major roles, and that was your role as Lorraine Adasio in the television film Roxanne the Prize Pulitzer. Talk about this a little bit.
I had left San Francisco. I had a divorce. And I needed to be Julie. I'd been my father's daughter and someone's husband, and I did not know who I was. And it was really important. And there was some therapy that I went to in Florida that was very healing. It's a place called Choices. And while I was there, they said, we don't think you should go back to New York. I had tried to go to New York and it was a little overwhelming. So I get down there and I got an agent, and I immediately, big fish, little pond. I was well trained. I had done, theater in San Francisco. Like I said, I had done my cabaret show. I had like tons of commercials running. So I booked 9 national commercials my first year. And I worked with China Phillips and Perry King on Roxanne the Prize Pulitzer. And then I did, I worked with Burt Reynolds on Grand Theft Hotel. And then which I thought was funny because then I went into Grand Hotel Berlin. It was very funny. And then I did, I worked with John Travolta in a picture called Chains of Gold. And then I worked with Adam Baldwin in Miami Blues. And I was supposed to do the Nora Dunn part, but they ended up hiring Nora, and they said, we love you so much. Could you do this funny bit with Alec? And I said, sure.
A Captain's Log returns in a moment.
Welcome back to A Captain's Log, broadcast television's only Star Trek talk show. Lily and I are joined by Julie Caitlin Brown from Star Trek: The Next Generation's 7th season 2-parter, Gambit, and Deep Space Nine's first season episode, The Passenger.
Now, Julie, you're back home in California. Did you take a break from acting, or did you just jump right back in?
I started working immediately. I did a pilot for ABC called Missing Persons. And then I did a movie with Johnny Depp that I got fired from, which was hilarious. I worked with Marlon Brando. We were rehearsing in a house in Bel Air, and I was the only one that wanted to touch Marlon. Very funny story. 2 seconds. So Faye Dunaway, Johnny Depp, Marlon Brando, some fabulous other great character actors, been around a long time. And we were doing a table read, and they asked Marlon Brando and Faye Dunaway to improv a scene. And we're all going, oh shit. Like, what? That can't go well, because we're like, but Jeremy Levin, who was the writer, and it was called Juan DeMarco. And he just said, no, I need you to break down these barriers and all these ideas of who you think you are. I need you to just improv the scene for me. So they do the improv and everything, and Marlon is messing with Faye, and he's like 300 pounds, and he props his leg up on her lap and says, oh, darling, I've had such a rough day. Could you massage my feet? And she's like, in improv, you have to say yes. And she goes, of course, darling. And she takes his shoe off, and he's got these little Chinese slippers on, and he's got little white socks. And she takes the shoe off. And very gingerly, she's sort of massaging his foot. And he's really messing with her. And he goes, without missing a beat, goes, oh, now, darling, you have to take my socks off. So she takes off his sock, and there's his 70-year-old feet. And Faye, she's doing the best she can. It was tough, in front of everybody. And she knew he was messing with her. So she massages it a little tiny bit, and then the scene is end. So I walked up to Marlon and I said, would you like a real foot rub? And he said, yes. I said, okay, come over here. And I got in there, because I do it for my dad. And I got in there and I have really strong hands because I played guitar for like 25 years. And I'm working on his feet and he looks at me and goes, oh, you know how to spell shiatsu. And I said, yes, I do. And then he wanted to work on my hands and stuff. So I ended up like throwing elbows in his back and working on him and stuff. I loved Marlon. I said, Marlon, I'll tell you, man, I'm 35. If you were 35, we'd be doing it right now. I mean, that would, no questions asked.
Well, talk about footloose and fancy free. Here you are, a 35-year-old woman giving Marlon Brando a foot massage after an improv class. Talk about totally unexpected. But hey, sometimes life solely surprises you, right?
Oh, there's another one, but I can't tell it. Anyway, so that was Don Juan DeMarco. And then I got Babylon 5 and I did 4 episodes of that, and makeup was prohibitive, and I came back as a human and it didn't pan out on the series. And so off I went to do guest stars, and I just started doing a bunch. I did Jag. I loved Jag. Did a couple of episodes for them. But you know, I hit 37 and I wanted to have another child, and I met my second husband, and I thought, I mean, I'll keep acting.
It's the end of the show already. Ah, man, come on. This went by so fast. And we were both having so much fun like this interview, but I feel like there's so much that we haven't got to. Julie, will you come back next week?
I'm 63 years old. We have to, I've got a lot of life here.
The end of the show already. Ah, man, come on. This went by so fast. And we were both having so much fun like this interview, but I feel like there's so much that we haven't got to. Julie, will you come back next week?
Awesome.
Yes.
Just no more bug stories.
Sounds great. Now, we'll also see everyone back next week for part 2 with Julie Caitlin Brown.
Bye.
See ya.
Hello, happy, my old friend. I'm glad you've manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me happy. My old friend, I'm glad you've manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me happy. My old friend, I'm glad you've manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me happy. My old friend, I'm glad you've manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me happy. Ooh. Thank you